Hi guys, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host Indira, and today I'm here with Normal and American athlete Allie Ostrander. She's well known not only for her incredible athletic achievements, which include being a 3-time NCAA National 3K champion, having competed at the World Champs for both track and cross country, and competed in 3 Olympic trials, including this year's where she placed 7th, running an Olympic qualifying time. She's well known for sharing her journey, overcoming an eating disorder as a professional athlete, on her YouTube and social media. Allie's definitely known as an inspiration to many, and her honesty in her journey is something which many have been able to relate to and grow from. In this episode, Allie shares her reflections on overcoming an eating disorder and her current feelings around her summer and training. As always, please be sure to give the show a rating if you've been enjoying it, as it helps give credibility to the podcast so I can keep bringing you guys the guests you want to hear from. Be sure to check the description down below for links to Allie's YouTube, Instagram, and newly started podcast. And finally, the audio quality improves as the episode goes along, so bear with it, guys. Okay, let's get into this. Hi, Allie. How are you? And welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited. It's taken us a little while to get here, but here we are.
Yeah. You know, the important thing is we're here now. So yeah, super excited to have you on, and I know everyone's been really looking forward to hearing from you. So first things first, for anyone who maybe doesn't already know who you are, I mean, first of all, first American on the podcast, so that's super cool. Can you briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I am Allie Ostrander. I run for a company called Normal. It's a European brand, so a lot of people in the US don't know about it, but maybe your podcast listeners will. And I am a professional trail, track, road, cross-country runner, and also a content creator on Instagram and YouTube, as well as now I do have my own podcast with my boyfriend. So yeah, just running, sharing about it. I think anyone that runs probably understands, like, it can be pretty tough. So I like to show all the highs and lows. And also, as backstory about me, I ran in college for track, and then signed a professional contract straight out of college, but ended up after a couple years, taking a break from professional running because I had an eating disorder and I needed to take time to recover. And since then, I've come back and I've been able to run PRs and like place better at USA meets than I had before. So it's been pretty exciting and something that I've shared a lot about, because obviously eating disorders are a very important topic in the running space, and they're very close to my heart because I know how hard that is and how isolating it can feel and scary. So I share a lot about my process, how I've, navigated that, and hopefully also show people like an example of you actually can become faster through recovery. It's not just the death of your athletic career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll link all of those socials, the YouTube, the podcast down below so you can check them out if you haven't already. And yeah, absolutely. You know, Allie's definitely the epitome of kind of an eating disorder success story, still a story still going. But, she recently placed 7th in the US Olympic trials, ran a PB there. So yeah, so much incredible stuff. And let's strip it back to the start. So how did you initially get into running?
Yeah, so both my parents were recreational runners. Neither of them ran in college, but when I was younger, they were in a running club. So I kind of grew up around like knowing that running was a thing. And then when my sister was in middle school, she did cross country, and she is 3 grades above me. So for me, it was either go to an after school program or go to these cross country practices. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll just join cross country because I don't want to go to this after school club. So I just started running with my sister's middle school team. And even at like a really young age, I was super competitive. Like, that's the thing about me. I'm so competitive. Or if it's a board game or a backyard dodgeball, like I'm so competitive. It's very hard for me to just have a good time. Like I'm focused on winning.
Yeah.
Um, and so anyways, I would get really good with like all the middle school boys, and I was a third grader, so I'm sure I was incredibly annoying, but that's just the way I am.
I mean, you know, competitiveness is definitely an essential ingredient for any professional athlete, for sure. And yeah, so I mean, at what point, you know, you were a junior, you had loads of success, you took national titles. Can you talk us through your reflections upon having that experience and how it impacted you at the time and maybe eventually led to you having an eating disorder?
Yeah, so when I was I mean, my eating disorder started really, really young, sixth grade, actually. And that was just because at that point, like I wasn't even running super competitively. I just knew that it was something that I was good at because I could keep up with middle school boys, you know? But I was like, well, I know that I'm good at running and being so competitive. I just wanted to continue to get better, and I wanted to make sure that I always was good at it. And so I was watching a middle school track meet, and I just heard someone say, like watching one of the women running, I heard someone say, oh yeah, she was faster last year, but she hit puberty, and now it's like she's running with a 15-pound backpack. And so just immediately in my head, I was like, well, I can't let that happen to me because I need to be good. Like I need to always be getting faster. And so I just started, thinking way more about what I ate and like kind of tracking calories and like trying to learn more about nutrition and how I could cut stuff out. And it just kind of it just kind of spiraled from there, and it became so deeply ingrained for me that it by the time I went to college, like I definitely knew that there was some sort of a problem, but even though I was kind of trying to like fix it and do a little bit better, it was like so ingrained in me that it was just habitual. And my belief system was so strongly set around me being small to be successful that it was really, really difficult to get out of that mindset. And there were multiple times that I went to therapy, I saw dietitians, I decided I was going to recover, but I just never could commit to it because it was so, my brain chemistry had literally been reformulated from the time I was like 10 or 11 years old until when I was, 19, 20. It had just, I had rewired my own brain to just believe these things that weren't even true and to act on these fears that weren't valid. So yeah, it was just really hard. And I think the question was how it happened. And I guess, yeah, I just was so competitive and so fixated on continually getting better that I didn't think about the long term of like, oh, maybe she slowed down for 1 year, but then ended up being really strong and capable and durable and able to be way faster later on in life. In my head, it was just like that 1 year was going to be the end of the world. Because when you're 11 years old, every year seems so important, and yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, hearing that and hearing how much you went through, you know, I can only imagine what a difficult time that was. And I mean, it's impressive the amount of mental strength almost taken there. And, you know, you mentioned rewiring your brain, and that's a lot of drive. You also talk about, you know, that need to be good, that desire. Firstly, where do you think that came from?
I don't know. I feel like a lot of it honestly was just genetic because I remember always being that way, even in kindergarten gym class, just like wanting to win at tag and stuff. Like at that point in my life, I don't really think I'd been taught
Yeah.
that. I think it was just like something that was ingrained in me from when I was born. And I honestly don't really know why. But then, like, my parents did raise me in the mentality of like, look, no matter what you're doing, you should always like try your hardest, put your best effort into it. And that was, I think that's a great mentality to have. And I appreciate that that's how they raised me. But probably that also contributed to the competitiveness because I was like, no matter what I'm doing, I got to do as good as I can.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It's such a line, and it's kind of, you know, the bigger the benefit, the bigger the almost disbenefit in that respect. You know, when you've got that drive, it's a pro and it's a con at the same time. And I guess it's learning to manage that, and not your average person doesn't necessarily have that level of drive. And I think it's interesting you mentioned there, you know, what an unfortunate thing to have heard, you know, what an awful thing for someone to have said about with the backpack analogy over there. Surely there must have been other things that people might have mentioned, and you know, people might say in the sport, oh, run more, you get faster. But it is so common, especially for girls of that age, that everyone gravitates towards kind of food or comments around food. Why do you think for you that was the thing that you decided would be able to help so much more than maybe focusing on a different aspect?
Um, I think as someone that's competitive, I'm also a perfectionist. I also love control. And I think that that was just something that felt like really easy to grasp onto as something that I could like master, hone in on, and fully control. Like, you can't always control what will happen in a race, but I was like, I can always control what I'm eating and the size that I am at the time of my race. And that, since I believed that that was so important, I thought, great, I'll just control that, and then I'll be able to control my performance.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes logical sense. And I think that's an experience that so many people talk about, often it coming back to that feeling of control, and it's, I guess, working through that later on. And so you mentioned how along the way you tried to recover multiple times, you saw dietitians. For you, why do you think that it wasn't an easy fix? And why do you think it was that you still remained with the eating disorder despite making those attempts?
Well, I think that it kind of goes back to the instant gratification and the desire to continually be good. I think for me, I felt like if I decided to recover, I wouldn't continue improving. I would probably take a little step back, which, like, at the end of the day, I kind of did have to. Like, I took a year to take a step back from professional running, but ultimately, like, it did make me a better runner. But when I was in college or high school, I felt like, oh, I can't do that because, well, in high school, I was like, I can't do that because then colleges won't want to recruit me if they see that I got slower one year. That'll be a really bad look, and I won't get the opportunities I want. And when I was in college, I thought, if I don't keep improving, or if I have a bad year, I won't get a pro contract, and then I won't have the opportunities I want. And so every year and every race and every instance felt so important for being able to stay in the sport and stay competitive, that, like, I couldn't convince myself to let recovery be the number one goal instead of performance.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I mean, it is so much pressure, especially with that collegiate system. And I know, you know, you haven't mentioned it specifically, but you were winning, you were dominating, you were kind of the attention of kind of the running scene out there. And that is a lot of pressure that comes with that. Do you think that the success you had added to that pressure, and maybe you wouldn't have struggled as much with an eating disorder if you hadn't been succeeding?
Yeah, I definitely think so, because I mean, even in high school, like, as I said, it started when I was in about sixth grade, but then I think it exacerbated because I was having success and I was winning these races. And when I got to high school as a freshman, I was winning and setting these records and being in, not, it's not like I was famous, but like being in the public eye in that way. There was scrutiny around me, and I started getting so many more comments of, oh, well, she'll slow down once she hits puberty, or, oh, it's just like a phenom freshman, but, you know, she'll slow down once she's a senior, like things like that. It just made me so stressed about like keeping this up. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I have to do more. Like, I have to continue this, or even, figure out ways to get even more control. And um and then that kind of continued in college, where I was like, if I do slow down, or if I do take a step back, people will notice, because they'll notice that I'm not there, or they'll notice that I have a bad race. Like, I can't just be under the radar.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's really difficult. And, you know, especially at a young age to be contending with those emotions and those expectations, it's a lot. And for anyone who's maybe not experienced an eating disorder, or just to give people an idea of, where your head was at the time, can you talk us through your relationship with food at its worst, and, how low were those lows for you?
Yeah, and I don't really like to give like super specific examples because it can be like triggering if someone, I don't want it to be like this is what an eating disorder is. If you eat differently than this, your problems aren't valid, or like if you are, it's not like I just don't want to get too specific, but it was just I was constantly, constantly, constantly fixated on food and exercise. Like, what can I do to burn more? What can I do to eat less? And not even like at a certain point, it became less about like, oh, how can I gain fitness? It was more about how can I shrink myself. And um, and I was just trying to restrict in so many ways that it was hard for me to care about other stuff. I feel like that's pretty common, but I just yeah, I don't know. There were also like there were ebbs and flows with it. Like I think there were periods of time where I was maybe more like actually starting to kind of recover, and then periods of time where I was more like falling back into those habits. And I remember one of the worst times was during COVID for me, and I would just all day, it was just I would exercise all day and I wouldn't do anything else. I wouldn't hang out with friends. I stopped being able to sleep because my body just couldn't turn off because it was like so stressed from the lack of food and the excessive exercise. And I was just miserable. Like I was depressed. I had insomnia and all of this, but I was so fixated on it. I felt like I couldn't stop. And if I didn't do that, I felt so guilty and bad that like I had to. It was compulsive. Um, yeah, so those are just some examples of kind of how it was. But I think the biggest thing is just that my entire life was focused around just food and exercise, and like it was all that I could think about all the time.
Yeah. No, it really is an all-consuming situation and so complicated, so many factors involved. And so let's talk about when you finally did get recovered and go through that process where things finally kind of took a turn for the better. What do you think was different about the time that you seek, or when you went to seek recovery, that was the turning point that allowed you to actually recover?
Um, yeah, I think that the big difference was that I felt like I had no other options. Like, I know that that sounds bad. It wasn't like some moment where I was like, I need to do this for me and my health. I really felt like, okay, I'm not going to be able to continue running unless I change what I'm doing. And like, I'm not going to be able to not get injured. And this is just going to be a continuous cycle of me being heartbroken. And so that's kind of what drove me to do it. And then actually being in the center for 6 weeks was huge because I think for me, like I'd said, I had wanted to recover before, but I'd never done it because I just couldn't hold myself accountable to that. But being in this recovery center, there were people there. I was there like 10 hours a day and having all my meals there, and people were there to make sure that you did eat and to like talk you through it and to support you, and you would have therapy to work through all of the issues. And so it was like, yeah, it was just such a good jump start to get me to a place where I would be able to actually continue to do it on my own. Whereas before, I feel like I just didn't have the tools or the accountability to do it by myself.
Yeah, definitely. And that sounds like a very intense period and something that definitely would have taken a lot out of you mentally. And I know that you also shared that journey publicly on social media at the time. How did you find that contributed to things?
Yeah, I actually, so during those 6 weeks, I was posting some on YouTube and Instagram, but I didn't actually talk about being in the recovery center until I had been discharged. And then I explained like what the last 6 weeks had been.
because I wasn't planning on sharing about my recovery just because it is a very personal journey and it's so emotionally and mentally draining. Like, it's hard to like want to take the risk of having internet hate involved in that as well, or scrutiny. But I was like, at the time, I had this YouTube channel and I really liked connecting with the audience, but I felt like I couldn't be my authentic self if I wasn't sharing the full story. So that was what inspired me to do it. One day at treatment, we had to write down our values, and my top one was authenticity. And I just felt like I needed to share to feel authentic in myself and also to make it less stigmatized to struggle with this and to just give people kind of an example of someone that was like in the thick of it, because I had heard of people who had recovered, but it's not common to share about it and you often don't hear until it's a success. And I think it's more powerful to kind of put it out there and like, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but like, let's just wait and see, I guess. And so yeah, I decided to share about it then, and it's been a pretty big part of my social media presence since then, which I didn't expect at all. When I started my YouTube channel, I thought it was just going to be like training and trying to make the Olympics, and it's ended up being a lot about like mental health and recovery and sharing all the highs and lows. And I mean, I actually really appreciate that because I think it's nice that it went a direction that I never expected, because that shows that I'm not scripting it. It is just whatever script happens to occur in my life. Um, but yeah, sharing has definitely been good. And even the other day at the track, this woman stopped me and said that um, her daughter is struggling right now and that my content really helps her, and she's like really thankful for what I do. And just hearing that sort of stuff is so encouraging, because sometimes recovery can feel kind of isolating. You can feel like no one understands, um, and to be able to like share my process with other people and hear about theirs and feel like I am helping people is really powerful, and it keeps me motivated to continue and to stay on this track, because relapse is so common. And I feel like a large reason that I haven't relapsed is because I have such a strong supportive community of people online, and also that I have put myself out there as an example, and I want to continue to be a good example, so that like motivates me.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think, authenticity is such a great value to have. And it's so brave and so beautiful to share your journey so naturally and so openly, because, that's what people can really, I guess, see themselves in, feel inspired by, and it really definitely does help people out. So, for people who are maybe still in the phase of recovering or struggling with that, you mentioned before how it's control mainly that maybe was the mindset behind an eating disorder. What do you think, if you can maybe identify anything specific you changed in your head, or the way you kind of approached things, your mindset, your thought process, that allowed you to kind of flip that away from controlling food to maybe finding control in other ways? Or
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, you kind of just have to be willing to let go of some control. But I also think that when I decided to recover, the eating disorder had stopped giving me control over my performance. Which, while I could still control maybe the way that I looked, I wasn't able to control the way that I performed, because I would constantly get injuries or get overtrained or just be too tired or have inconsistent workouts. And so I felt like already I wasn't getting the same control I initially had from that. And then I also realized that it was more of a pseudo control, because while my eating disorder made me feel like I had control, in reality, it was taking the control away from me, because I had to focus my entire life around the ED to get that quote control. And so when I started to recover, I tried to reframe it and think that I'm taking control back, and now it's in my hands instead of the ED's. And also that there were so many mindset shifts like that happened. But another good one is I used to think that like eating before and after a workout was taken away from what I could gain from the workout. Whereas now I know that like eating before and after improves performance, improves recovery, improves injury prevention. And so like I'm gaining so much from fueling around my workout. It's kind of stuff like that where I'm just doing the opposite thing, but now I see it as having control, whereas before I saw it as losing control.
Yeah, definitely. And that's so great to hear, and it definitely is the way to go. If you reflect back a little bit, what would you now say to yourself at, say, 10 or when you first went to college? What do you think that yourself at those ages needed to hear?
I think I just needed to hear that like going through puberty and is scary, but it's entirely 100% necessary to be your absolute strongest self, to be the best runner that you want to be. While maybe right now it will be the fastest track to getting fast next year, it is the track towards being fast in 10 years when you're actually at your athletic peak. And so it's incredibly important, not just for your overall health, but also for your performance down the line. And even though right now this season seems like the most important thing in the world, you'll be so grateful in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, 50 years even, if you actually allow your body to grow and change in the way it needs to become its strongest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about definitely embracing yourself and, I guess when you're a shell of yourself or you're not fully allowing yourself to develop properly, that isn't the full version of you, and that can't lead to the best performances overall. And I guess another thing to kind of talk around here in terms of, once you've recovered, you mentioned how relapses are common. Fortunately for you, you haven't fallen into that boat. Is there anything that you think, any times that maybe you've felt these thoughts creeping in and anything you've done to push them back away?
Yeah, definitely. I think there have been a few times like having a YouTube channel is amazing and I really enjoy it, but it also means that I'm looking at videos of my body very often. And so I think sometimes when a workout goes badly or a race goes badly, and then I'm rewatching footage again and again, I start to scrutinize my body and blame my body for that bad race. But I have a really, really supportive coach that I can just state those thoughts to, and he'll like talk me off the ledge. And same with my boyfriend Spencer, like so supportive and really understand like what I've gone through. And so I just feel like I have to lean on other people and get their thoughts on the situation, because in the moment, like my feelings towards that race and towards those videos of myself are so emotionally charged that they're not really valid, and shouldn't be listened to. But obviously, if I'm not hearing any other noise, then I'm going to listen to my own. So just leaning on people for support is really important, especially when you're having those thoughts that are super self-deprecating.
Yeah, 100%. That's so true. It's always good to have a strong support network, and it's okay to reach out to other people and ask for that support when you need it. I guess for you as well, another thing is you talk about not getting your period until you were 25. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I was like so relieved because I didn't want to get a period. It seemed like a pain. And also, I grew up in a time where periods were pretty embarrassing as well. Um, I thought it was like I was so relieved because I just was dreading the day that I had to like tell my mom I'd gotten it and like go buy tampons. It just sounded like the worst thing in the world. Um, and so I was super relieved. And then I didn't actually realize until I was probably like 20 years old that having a period was like a very vital sign for females. And it showed that you had a good energy balance and that your bones were getting stronger and your hormones were healthy. I didn't realize that it was actually important or it had benefits beyond just like telling you you're not pregnant. And it's crazy that I didn't know that till I was 20, because I'm also like, I'm pretty into exercise science. I was an exercise science major, and like just didn't realize that for so long. And now looking back, I am like so upset that it took me so long to realize that. And then after that, so long to actually take steps to allow my body to have a period, because it is so important for health. And just, had no idea. So yeah, it's crazy. But getting a period for the first time at 25 was also like a weird experience, because you're obviously just supposed to like know how to do everything. And I was a noob for it all. But I was also very excited because at that point I'd been like pretty seriously pursuing recovery for a couple years. And so to have that reassurance that like my body was getting stronger and getting healthier and able to sustain a menstrual cycle was definitely good reassurance.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, it's so shocking to hear that that information just wasn't around. And it was the same sort of for me when I was going through the age groups. There just wasn't information about this stuff at the time. And yeah, it just really wasn't good. And I guess for you, that recovery process you mentioned there that, it was sort of a few years. How long would you say it was until you started to see the benefits? And, did you see any sort of dips initially or plateaus in performance?
Yeah, I think I never saw quite as much of a dip as I expected. Like I thought that my performance would just plummet. But I basically just had, so right after I started recovery, I got a really bad injury, which was not because I was recovering. It was because of like all the damage I had done years before, but felt like it was because I was recovering. So that was also hard to not relapse at that point. But anyways, it was like the worst injury I've ever had. I had to take 4 months off running. And so when I came back, I was obviously out of running shape, but it was more just because I hadn't run for 4 months.
Mm.
Um, and then I just kind of like slowly started working back into it and slowly like incorporated some workouts and stuff. And probably like 6 months ish afterwards, I was able to run like fairly close to my PRs, but not quite there. And that was kind of the case for like 2 years, where I was like not far off my PRs, but not hitting them either. Until this year when I finally like, I also got way more serious this year with it, where I think the 2 years before I was a little bit apprehensive about investing too strongly in it, because I was afraid that that would cause me to fall into old patterns and habits. And so this year I got more serious and was like talking with my coach, like, I really want a PR this year. I want to run the steeplechase at the Olympic trials. Like I want to do this. And so we made like a very specific training plan to get there. And so this year I really felt like was when I kind of made that breakthrough.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was so great to see, I watch your YouTube channel, I'm sure, loads of people listening do as well. It's so lovely to see that progression and to finally have sort of that breakthrough year after all the work that you put in was really great and, really inspiring as well. Um, and I guess, to sort of wrap up on the whole eating disorder side of things, do you think that in the States at the moment, there's a lot more knowledge and awareness around these kind of things, or what's the scene out like there?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much more. It's actually crazy, like us talking about how when we grew up, there was like no information about any of this, because like it's not like we're old, but things have changed so much in the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years. Like I think 10 years ago, it kind of people started talking about like the female athlete triad, and then 5 years ago, it was Red S, and there's just so much more information about the importance of a menstrual cycle, the importance of eating enough, and like having good hormones, and it's just so much more of a conversation. Um, and it's really exciting to see, because I think like having that information when I was younger potentially could have been life changing. You never know, can't go back in time, but I'm just glad that information is being more widely spread. And hopefully. And like there were so many more people talking up about or speaking up about their own experiences with eating disorders or Red S. And so I think that's really powerful too, just for the younger generation to have those examples and that information to lead their path a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it is interesting as well. The more people kind of open up and share their stories, you realize that, people are comparing themselves to other people, but everyone was also struggling with the same thing. So it was almost a kind of a negative cycle going on there.
Yeah.
Okay. And I guess something that is kind of unique about your story, or something that a lot of people take inspiration from, is the fact that you've gone through the process and you've come out positively the other side and performed better than ever before. There's a lot of people who've maybe got lost along the way or not fully made it out. What do you think's enabled you to have come through the whole process? And, do you have any thoughts on maybe why some people don't manage to fully ever realize their potential?
I think part of it obviously is luck because like you just never know exactly how your body will respond because like there is so much damage done. And I think I've been lucky enough where I have been able to train pretty well, like after recovery and through it. Whereas some people, like their bodies they kind of reach a breaking point from this eating disorder and are never able to fully like regain that strength to be able to run enough. It is a really high impact sport. And I also think a huge part of it for me was just my support system, like having my parents and my sister, my boyfriend, who all supported me, were there with me every step of the way. And also like now having David Roach as my coach, who's just like so adamant about like fueled athletes are faster, you're a power athlete, it's so important. And I think having that like belief instilled in me is so important because like going through recovery for people, I think the limiting beliefs that they have about their body and how it will perform if it's not the size they want it to be or believed it needed to be can be more limiting than their body is to them. You know what I mean? Like if you're standing on the line thinking I cannot succeed in this body, then you won't succeed. But maybe it's not because of your body, it's because you never believed you could. And so I think that that's like a really important part of it too. And yeah, so the to sum it up, I'd say like having a great support system, having a body that was able to bounce back and actually get stronger, and get more resistance towards injuries, and then also like having belief instilled in me and fostering belief in myself and my ability regardless of my body.
Yeah, definitely. The power of the mind is not to be underestimated for sure. And so if we turn our attention to your comeback now, the races that you went through, I mean, along the way, you placed 30th at the World Cross Country Championships, a number of other really good races. For you, what was the most significant race? Was there a point where you thought, "Do you know what, I'm back and I'm fully back?" And how did the rate that you progressed compare with your expectations?
Yeah, I think I didn't like world cross country was awesome. Like I reached my goals there. My goals literally were to be top 30 and place better than I did amongst the US racers than I had at USA's. And so I was second American at World Cross and got 30th. So I was like spot on my goals. And I was really excited about that. And I felt like it gave me good momentum towards the track season, which the track season was like my A goal all year, like to have a really good track season. But then I didn't feel like I was fully back in track until I came to Boulder, did an altitude camp here, and started hitting these workouts that like I never ever could have done before. And I just got like so excited by that. And then I ended my altitude camp with winning a steeplechase at Portland Track Festival and running a PR. So like that stretch of like a month, like the altitude camp and then that race, I was like, oh my gosh, like I actually can be better than I ever was. And all year was kind of building up to that, like that was like a great moment for me. But all year I was like making strides towards it. And I did think that I could get there, but like obviously actually getting there is the best feeling ever.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And, it's so great that you got that moment. And for you, you talk about having those workouts, hitting splits that you'd never thought you'd hit before. How did you feel, mentally at that time? How did you feel physically as well during those sessions?
I I felt great. I mean, my coach was pacing me for these workouts, and he's like the most positive person in the world. So all workout he'd be like, "Hell yeah. Oh, you're crushing it. Like nice work. Amazing." And so obviously that was keeping me in a good mood. And then also just like having those sorts of breakthroughs like really gives you great momentum, not just like mentally, but also emotionally and physically. Like it kind of got me like hyped up in every way. And I felt like with also like being stronger now, I had way better speed. I was able to like hit faster reps at the ends of workouts. I felt like I was recovering faster from them, able to hit more workouts, really good workouts consecutively in a row than I had been before. And yeah, it was all really exciting. So I mean, I felt amazing. That was like one of the best just like training blocks of my life.
No, that's amazing to hear. And I guess that's what every runner's searching for, that moment when everything comes together or starts to come together for them. And obviously that was, preparation for the Olympic trials, which, you or alluded to earlier, that kind of being the A goal, that track season. Talk us through your mindset approaching these Olympic trials and, your reflections on the result.
Yeah. So as I said, I had like the most incredible like month racing and training of my life. And it was really exciting. And going into the Olympic trials, I was like super like confident in my fitness. Um, but then about 4 days after Portland Track Festival, so about 10 days before the trials, I got COVID. And that was like pretty heartbreaking at the time because I felt like, I mean, everything was coming together perfectly. And then this just threw a wrench in it. And luckily, it was a very mild case. So I was able to run through it for the most part. I had to miss like one workout basically. But that workout was going to be a 1500 race. So I was really bummed because I was excited for the race. But I was able to like stay level headed and go into the trials like, okay, the fitness is still there. I didn't lose anything. Like, you're going to be okay. And made it to the final, which is always, prelims are so nerve wracking. There's nothing worse than a USA's prelim. Well, other than probably the Worlds or any prelim, really. They all just are so nerve wracking. But made it to the final. So I was like, okay, like, let's just put it out there. Like, put yourself in the race. Like all year, I'd been a little bit conservative in my racing with like, being hesitant to go out too fast and always having a good close, but never really like going out and dying, which obviously you don't want to go out and fade in a race. But I think every once in a while, like if you're going to ride the line, like it is going to happen. And I hadn't had that happen. So I was like, look, if I'm going to like take a big risk, now is the time, because basically third and 12th is the same, or fourth and 12th is basically the same thing, like for all intents and purposes. And so I really wanted to like go out hard in this. And then immediately I was in like 11th place in the race and just like dropped off the back and had like a really bad water jump. And the beginning of the race was honestly just like a complete disaster, like the absolute opposite of what I wanted to happen. And that's part of track. Like you can't control exactly what will happen in a race. And you can go in with the best intentions and something else will happen. I think it's easy when you're watching track to be like, oh, why didn't they do that? Why didn't they do this? But like in the moment, it's really hard to make the race play out the way you want it to because everyone else has their game plan too. So anyways, the race did not start the way I wanted it to. And almost immediately it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm dropped off of this lead pack. Like I am disconnected from it, and making this Olympic team is an even smaller odds than it was before, which it was already small. And so like I kind of had to mentally regroup during that final and be like, okay, whatever you have today, just give it, like make the most out of this race. It's not going the way you wanted it to, but it it doesn't have to go badly. Like it will only go badly if you decide to give up right now. And so I just kind of mentally regrouped and tried to like slowly pick off people and run a strong race. And ended up running a PR, which was good, but like it definitely left me wanting more and a little bit disappointed just because I do think that I had more in me and it just didn't play out the way I wanted it to. But yeah, I mean, overall, it was like such a good year and I made so much progress. So I'm not like disappointed in the year. I was just disappointed in my execution on that race.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I mean, it was an Olympic qualifying time as well. So that's obviously tough to take in knowing that you had the standard required. But, it sounds like with everything going well, that, this is definitely something that can realistically happen moving forwards if you so wanted it to. And I guess, for you moving on from that race, you talk a lot about sort of, the mental strength you showed in that race. You've shown clearly you're someone with a lot of mental strength overall. How did you kind of reset and prepare for the trail season ahead?
Yeah, I think that coming off of track was it was a really, really hard reset because I didn't plan to end my track season at the trials. I was going to do a couple more races and go for some PRs in my other events because I had only raced steeples all year. But right after track, I kind of had some hip pain and like basically just cross trained for a week. And at that point, it was like, okay, I think this is just my body's way of telling me like it needs to not do track for a little bit. And like I need to take a step away or else I'm going to end up injured. And so I had to make a hard shift and then fully transition over to trails. And it was definitely hard because I just like mentally and emotionally wasn't done with it. I wanted to keep doing it, didn't feel burnt out at all, didn't feel exhausted from it, like was very motivated to continue doing it. And so that was really hard to feel like the end of my track season was kind of stolen. But then I was like, okay, I'm just going to fully embrace trails. We also moved. So at that point, like a few weeks after the trials, my boyfriend and I moved from Seattle to Boulder. So that was like a big transition too, like pretty exhausting. And then once I was here, I feel like I could kind of embrace the trails because there's so many beautiful trails here. And that was more fun. But yeah, the first race of my trail season did not go well. It was like one of the hardest races of my life and probably also one of the most mentally challenging races, which to then like go through so much mental challenge for like a bad result is obviously brutal. But yeah, I think that kind of last year the same sort of thing happened where my first trail race was really bad. So I think my body kind of needs to get a shock into the system before it can fully transition and get used to those longer, like just more undulating sort of efforts than what track feels like. So yeah, like hopefully the transition will start going more smoothly. I've got a couple more races coming up, so we'll see. You guys, I know that I'm in good shape. Like I just PR'd on the track, so I've just got to get away. I've got to figure out exactly how to get that to transition to trails.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's definitely a patience game. I feel like the fitness can be there, but there's just so many external factors. And I mean, your Tatra Sky Marathon race, that one was, cut short by weather. So many things can impact on it. And yeah, I mean, the race you say, the one being the highest of your life, the Sierre Zinal race, is that pronounced correctly? Yeah.
I mean, don't ask me. I probably pronounce it wrong all the time, but that's how I do say it. So.
Awesome. We're rolling with that then. I mean, that was 20 miles, 7,000 feet. How do you prepare your body for, such an endurance-based race, especially coming off, say a 3K steeple, which is a lot shorter and track-based?
Yeah, and I think for me, part of the problem was I am generally like a lower mileage runner. And I think that the longer the race is, the more that high mileage benefits you. So I tried to prepare for that by doing like a few long trail runs. So I did like a 16-mile trail run. I did a 14-mile trail run. So I was working more of that stuff in. I did a lot of like hill repeats and some long cross training sessions. But I think that for a 20-mile race with that much vert. Like it is just important to get like some long days in the mountains in your legs, and potentially like back-to-back days, so you practice doing that on tired legs as well, because I definitely felt like I was lacking in that aspect, where I felt really, really strong in the beginning of the race, but then died really hard. I just felt like I didn't have the muscular endurance to like take that much, just like beating on my legs of going up and down and up and down.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny how fitness can kind of not quite translate across different disciplines and how specific it can be to certain types of work. And I guess, getting a bit conscious of time now, if we move on to some listener questions. So, first up, we've got, how did you accept recovery and how did you deal with an eating disorder whilst being an athlete? Which that's quite long, so feel free to give kind of a shortened version of, obviously we've covered some aspects of these along the way already.
Yeah, I think I said that I accepted recovery because I felt like I had no other options. I think ideally I would have accepted recovery much earlier than that, but I didn't really have the urgency because I didn't have the information that I do now. But I would say that if I could, like, ideally go back in time and tell, my 13-year-old self, I'd be like, look, like a period is so important for your overall health. Like eating enough makes you stronger, makes your bones stronger, makes you more durable, enables you to reach another level, to improve more. And so like that would have been how I accepted recovery. It's not what happened though, unfortunately. And then what was the second part of the question?
How did you deal with an eating disorder whilst being an athlete?
I think like a really important thing is to find a coach that's super supportive, understands, and encourages you to continue. And also, having a coach is so vital because you can have them write in like exactly what you're doing each day instead of like letting your brain decide like what you should do for training, because it's really hard to pick out what is led by the eating disorder and what is led by you.
Yeah, definitely some wise words there. And do you think there is pressure on women specifically to look a certain way?
Yeah, because just in general, societally, there obviously is like thin privilege. There's the advantages you get from looking a certain way, and obviously there is the yeah, there's just societal standards for what a woman's body should look like. And then when you also add in kind of the misconceptions of what a runner's body needs to look like, it's definitely a lot. I feel like women probably grow up feeling the urge to restrict food, to diet, to change their body much more than men do. And it's hard. It's a lot to deal with, especially when you are an athlete and you're growing.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny how these kind of societal ideas come along and people just sort of quite literally run away with them and it can be, the exterior or the external can become such an important part of identity or feeling a sense of belonging, I guess. And we've then got one on, how did you switch your mindset from seeing food as quote unquote bad to seeing it as fuel?
Um, I mean, it's obviously just a really gradual process, but I think like being in the treatment center for 6 weeks was actually really pivotal for me because I was eating so much more, and that I would not have been able to do on my own. And it scared me so much. But over those 6 weeks, I got to witness and see that nothing bad happened to me. And I actually like felt good in my training and everything was fine. And I think that that's important. It's just like you have to face the fear to realize that there was nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, definitely. Often the case with things like this, you got to plunge right into the deep end really to realize that actually, nothing bad is going to happen to you. How did it feel to run in the world cross country, and what's the highlight of your career been?
Running world cross country was so fun. That's actually the most fun I've had at like a very high level event, because you have the team atmosphere of like running for your country as well. And then having teammates, it just makes it so enjoyable. Like I was less so fixated on just myself. Like I was also like, oh, where are my teammates at? Like, oh, now we're together. We can like try to catch that girl. So it made it really, really fun. I enjoyed it a lot. It was also like kind of low key an obstacle course. It had like trees and like ramps and a mud pit and sand. So I was thriving. I loved it. It was like Mario Kart.
Amazing.
Yeah, I really want to do it again. And then the highlight of my career, I don't know. I mean, it's so hard because obviously, like, I'm still really proud of everything that I achieved while I had an eating disorder because, like, I still worked really hard for that. I trained hard, I was very dedicated, but I feel like it's a little bit marred because I know that partially, like, I didn't do things the right way. So I'm more proud of the things I've achieved since then, even though, like, winning an NCAA title is obviously huge. I think I'd say like the highlight of my career might be when I won Portland this year, just because it felt so amazing to have like gone through everything I went through and then run a PR and won a race. Like when there were so many times that I thought like I would never be able to do that again.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, they say the harder the journey, the greater the destination. So, or at least, I don't know, maybe I made that up, but
I sounds legit.
we'll go with it. And what is your favorite track session?
Mm, I I do really like 400 repeats and mile repeats. I think just because they're like so simple, like you really get a good indication of where you're at from those because it's probably something that you've done quite a bit before. So yeah, I really like the 16 by 400 workout and like 3 to 4 by mile sort of workout.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I feel like 400s are quite a popular one. And then we've got one, it's advice for Red S recovery.
Oh, okay. Oh, that was the whole question. Okay.
Yeah, it's quite a small one.
Right to the point. We love that. Um, yeah. I would say like definitely reach out for support. Like try to get if you can afford it, like get a sports dietitian involved. Make sure that your coach knows what you're doing. Try to find support people in your life that you trust and can rely on. And then just like try to slowly implement small changes. Like you don't have to change everything overnight, but like slowly taking on fears you have and doubts you have. And just like you know, basically teaching yourself that it wasn't something to be afraid of. That would be my advice.
Yeah, no, some great stuff there. So, take notes. And then we've also got one, you've kind of touched on it, but maybe you just want to re-sum it up in a sentence or so. What changed that made your last time in recovery truly be your last time?
Um, I think it was the urgency of feeling like I would not be able to continue running if I let this go on any longer. And then also the accountability that was added by going to treatment and sharing about it.
Yeah, no, lovely stuff. And what has motivated you to keep going / persevere with cross training after dealing with injuries?
Uh, just thinking about like being able to run again, like coming back from an injury is so much easier if you do cross train throughout it because starting from zero is harder than starting from, I don't know, 75%, or whatever you can get out of yourself cross training. And so, yeah, that's my motivation. Just like, I also have seen so many benefits from cross training, like as a supplement to normal training and as something I do during injury. But I think like having that positive reinforcement behind it too also helps.
Yeah, definitely. What percentage of your training would you say still comprises cross training?
Um, I feel like it's slowly going down. Like the running is slowly going up and the cross training is very slowly going down, but it's still probably like 40 to 50% of my training, depending on the week.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting to hear. Then we've also got favorite meal to cook.
Oh my gosh, it definitely depends on the season,
Mm.
but right now, oh, I'm really into everything that has to do with dill pickles. Like I'm highly susceptible to social media food trends. And I've been very into dill pickles lately. So I've really been enjoying making like pasta salad with like dill pickles and chicken and like a nice like ranch dill dressing. I think that's great, especially like during the summer when you kind of want something cool. It's like have a nice chilled pasta salad. It's nice and salty. Good stuff.
Yeah, no, 100% cold pasta salad hits different in summer for sure. Okay, and then a couple of quick fire questions to wrap out with. Reading or watching?
Oh, both. I can't choose one. Couldn't like reading is like my mindful, like relaxed time, and watching is my mindless relaxed time. I need both.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Number one thing to do to relax.
Um, well, now we get back to, I mean, it depends, but honestly, probably watch Love Island with Spencer. That's like how we end our nights a lot of the time. We'll like sit down with like a nice little snack, watch some Love Island. It's just like, yeah, a little bit trashy, but like you get very invested and it's so fun. Like, do you watch Love Island?
You know what? I have to say, I'm not a Love Island, but I am a Love is Blind. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Okay, I've watched that some, but I get so much more into Love Island for some reason. I think it's the British accents, to be honest. I really do enjoy them.
Yeah, no, it's always good to have a bit of something like that, a bit of drama, a bit of something to discuss.
Yeah,
A nice wind down for sure. Are you
yeah.
stay in or go out?
Stay in 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Any go-to activity?
Um, I mean, I really like going on like hikes or walks with Georgie, and Spencer, of course. We love a good coffee walk, like go walk to a coffee shop, get a coffee, bring George, get him a pup cup. And then like reading is a big activity for me, and then like going out to eat. We really like going out to like sushi and Indian food because those are things that like I never really cook. So yeah, probably those mainly.
Nice. If you had to pick an animal to describe yourself, what animal would you pick?
Oh, I actually asked Spencer this the other week, so I'm just gonna use his answer because I liked it. He said I'm like a honey badger just because I just don't give up on stuff. I just keep going.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I mean, that's the way to go, Just keep going and you'll get somewhere eventually. So if
Eventually, hopefully.
I mean, you're already going places. I mean, you're already at places. So
Thank you.
okay. Are you track or cross country?
I feel like it usually is just like whatever season I'm in, but I would say more track just because I have done more track. I do more workouts on the track. I feel like cross country is like, an old friend that you click as soon as you're back together, but you don't see each other that often. Whereas track is like we live in the same town, we hang out all the time.
Yeah. No, I love that analogy. Okay. And for runs, music or silence?
Um, I never music. It's either podcast or silence for me.
Okay, interesting. Any particular podcast you're enjoying at the moment?
Well, my coach has a podcast, so I love his. It's like a running science, but also like goofy humor podcast called Some Work All Play. And then I also listen to Emma Chamberlain's podcast called Anything Goes, just because I mean she's like a YouTube icon. So obviously as a YouTuber, I respect her a lot and what she's done. And she's just so entertaining. Like it's hard to explain why it's entertaining, but it just is. Like that's the magic of Emma Chamberlain. I don't know.
No, that's the best. That's what you're looking for. And okay, any misconceptions that people have about you that you feel like you want to clarify?
Yeah, so people think that I'm really, really short, and I would just like to say that I'm actually 5'3.5", and that's not even that short. I think I'm like 45th percentile, so like barely below average. Whereas people are always convinced I'm some sort of pipsqueak, and yeah, so I just have to straighten that out.
No, good to iron that one out. Actually, I have to say, when I was doing my background research before this, I put your name into Google. I think on your bio, the first thing that comes up, it's like 5'1" or something like that. So
That's I'm telling you, it's out there. I don't know who put it out there, but it's out there.
Yeah. Wikipedia's going to need some editing, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure.
No, well, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being here today, sharing your story. You've had such a journey, so many challenges, and you've shown to so many people that, it's possible to come through and deal with adversity. And, it's so beautiful to be vulnerable in that respect, and such an inspiration. So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. I'm glad we were able to make it happen. And I feel like you're honestly a great podcast host. Like I've done quite a few podcasts and I feel like you just make it flow nicely. So props to you for that.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And yeah, no, I'm a massive fan of your own content myself. And I know loads of others who are. So keep your stuff coming.
All right, will do. Thank you so much.
So that's it for today. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, be sure to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. This really helps to get the content out there. And I want to make this podcast the best possible for you. So go follow Fitter, Faster, Happier on Instagram. That's Fitter, Faster, Happier to leave your questions, comments, and feedback, and for updates and guest requests. All the best for the week ahead, guys. Run happy, live happy, be happy.